one-on-one with sports nutritionist Catherine Naulleau. How you doing?
Very good. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm very
excited.
Happy. Same here. I'm excited, and I'm happy to have you on as a sports nutritionist. I'm sure many people have a lot of questions to ask you, and you have quite an interesting resume. You've traveled all over the world with various teams who competed, in various sports. So we have a lot of questions to ask you. But first thing first, I'd like to know, how did you get involved in the world of sports nutrition? What interested you in this topic?
Right. So I used to row as an athlete. I rowed for about 10 or 12 years. And one day my coach came to me and said, you would be much better if you would be in a lightweight division. So you should think about losing weight. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think about, oh, my coach is calling me fat or he's just like body shaming me or whatever. I just he really brought the conversation around performance. And so I just went online and started to count calories a little bit and watch what I was eating and drop the weight. My performance were indeed better back then. And I did notice that some of my, the other athletes I was rowing with were doing some weird things with their nutrition. They would starve themselves. They would run with a garbage bag and sweat a lot. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So it got me into nutrition. I saw that it's something you can study in university. My first choice in university was to be a medical doctor, a sports physician.
Wow.
Did not have the grades. So I said, well, I'll just go through nutrition and then go through medical after. But I continued nutrition, and there's a variety of things that you do not know when you do not know the program of how a dietitian can be implicated in so many aspects of health and sport, how it can drastically improve health, performance, well-being. So yeah, that's why I continued that nutrition path.
Very interesting. And now you're also pursuing a PhD, right, at
Yes.
Université of Sherbrooke. Peux-tu répondre à la première question en français aussi, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, bien sûr. Donc, qu'est-ce qui m'a amené vers la nutrition sportive? Quand j'étais plus jeune, athlète. J'ai déjà été athlète dans ma vie. Je le suis toujours, mais je regarde les oiseaux, les canards et les poissons. Mais avant, donc, je faisais de l'aviron quand même un assez bon niveau. Puis mon entraîneur était venu me voir et m'avait dit, tu serais probablement meilleur si tu perdais du poids et que tu faisais les poids légers. Donc, j'avais fait mes petites recherches à l'époque. On va sur Internet, on commence à compter nos calories. Je me suis mis à perdre tranquillement du poids. Je n'avais pas perçu non plus la remarque par l'entraîneur comme étant négative ou voulant un peu rire de moi ou me traiter de t'es trop grosse, par exemple, ou de me pointer du doigt. Ça a vraiment été une discussion où c'était vraiment amené au niveau de la performance, puis que ça pourrait être vraiment quelque chose d'intéressant. Puis en ramant aussi avec des poids légers, on découvre d'autres techniques qui sont utilisées. On voit qu'il y en a qui ne mangent pas, qui vont transpirer avec des sacs de vidange.
Wow.
Donc à l'époque, je me suis dit, il y a sûrement un moyen de faire ça beaucoup mieux. Donc je me suis dirigée vers la nutrition à l'université. Mon premier choix à l'université, c'était médecin sportif. En fait, c'était vraiment mon premier choix. Par contre, n'ayant pas les notes nécessaires, je m'étais dit, je vais rentrer en nutrition pour pouvoir aller vers le médical. Puis, j'ai décidé de continuer parce que j'ai beaucoup aimé ça.
Right. And you also mentioned, or just a second ago, you mentioned that nutrition is involved in all aspects of life, in terms of being a sports nutritionist, and nutritionists are involved in various aspects, from sports to healthcare industry and so on. Can you educate us on what a sports nutritionist actually does? Give us kind of a summary of the role.
Yeah, so a sports nutritionist has all the basic elements of what is a good nutrition, a daily good nutrition, but then also has some exercise physiology knowledge as well about how this nutrition can improve performance, help an athlete to recover. So one of the first goal a sport dietitian does is actually make sure the athlete covers well all the basics. So when young athletes move to Montreal, for instance, they come to the training center. Some don't know how to cook. They don't necessarily know how to do their groceries. So really it's to make sure that all the basic is there, and then to educate them around what they need to eat before, during, and after, how to recover well, how to make sure that they also enjoy some of their food. So they go for pizza, fries. If they like that kind of food, they should never restrict themselves, but just to make sure that it fits very well with their training.
Right.
I'd say another aspect of a sport dietitian is to be really involved around the traveling, the competing, which is where we do get sometimes more nutrition issues with athletes. When we're home, we can eat usually well. When we're outside, it's not the same food. Some have allergies, intolerances. Some have difficulties to eat because of their stress. So it's try to be involved as much as we can around that to help athletes fuel. Even it's having animal crackers or candies or cookies. If it's what works for the athlete, then it's to of course, not feed on cookies for a week, but to help them. And then when all these steps are well done, then we can move to the best part, which is supplements, ergogenic aids like creatine, protein, beta-alanine, buffer, caffeine. So you can really get that little extra edge. So it's really to get all these pillars of the pyramid until you can get to the really top level. So it takes years to get there, but it's the beauty of the work.
Fascinating. If you don't mind answering that in French as well. And feel free to go, on peut mélanger les deux. We can go, we can...
On peut faire du franglais.
Oui.
Donc, quel est le rôle d'une nutritionniste sportive? Bien sûr, c'est de connaître toute la base par rapport à la nutrition. C'est quoi bien manger, pouvoir enseigner ça comme il faut à un athlète. Ensuite, c'est de s'assurer que l'athlète comprend comment s'alimenter avant, durant, pendant l'entraînement. Les jeunes athlètes qui déménagent, par exemple, au Centre national, souvent ne savent pas cuisiner ou ils n'aiment pas ça, ils ne savent pas comment cuire du poulet ou cuire un œuf ou du riz. Donc, ça, c'est la base. Donc, il faut s'assurer que l'athlète est capable de faire ça. Puis, s'il n'aime pas se faire à manger, ben, peut-être d'aller vers des options de repas traiteurs déjà préparés qui peuvent être livrés à la maison. Ensuite, c'est d'être vraiment impliqué au niveau des voyages, des compétitions, des camps d'entraînement qui vont être à l'extérieur de là où ils habitent, dans le fond de Montréal ou de leur ville principale. Quand on est à la maison, généralement, on mange bien, on n'a pas trop de difficulté à trouver ce dont on a besoin. Par contre, dans d'autres pays, en Europe, en Asie, en Russie, c'est des destinations, par exemple, souvent pour le judo ou récemment avec la pandémie, beaucoup de destinations qui sont en Europe, donc on n'a pas toujours accès à ce dont on a besoin. Les athlètes qui ont des intolérances, des allergies graves, sont un peu picky. Ils n'aiment pas tout ce qui est disponible, donc on ne veut pas que l'athlète arrête de s'alimenter ou finisse par manger juste des bonbons et des biscuits parce que c'est tout ce qui est disponible. Donc, c'est d'aider, quoique ce n'est pas si mauvais, manger des bonbons et des biscuits, mais à un moment donné, il faut que ce soit beaucoup plus complet quand l'athlète a voyagé pendant plusieurs semaines. Donc, ça, c'est important, là, quand les athlètes reviennent de compétition, de toujours faire des suivis avec eux, comment ça a été, particulièrement pour ceux qui ont plus de difficultés là, avec cet aspect-là. Quand on est rendu, là, quand l'athlète est bien éduqué, là, on peut vraiment aller chercher le bout de la pyramide, qui est la partie, je considère quand même vraiment intéressante. Là, on peut tomber dans des suppléments, des aides ergogènes, la créatine, protéines, bicarbonate, jus de betterave. Donc, d'aider l'athlète à comprendre qu'est-ce que tu as besoin de prendre, si tu as besoin de prendre des suppléments, qu'est-ce que ça peut apporter. Donc, c'est tout ça mis ensemble. Il y a des athlètes, ça va un peu plus vite que d'autres. Il y en a, on reste à la base quand même assez longtemps. Puis au fil des années, on peut progresser. Mais des fois, on est rendu là, puis il faut qu'on retourne là, parce que ça, c'est plus maîtrisé comme il faut.
Alors, il y a beaucoup de éducation que tu partages avec tous les athlètes. You're continuously educating these athletes in their development and knowledge of nutrition. One of the questions.
Yeah, I mean, there are athletes going to multiple world champions. They've been to 2 Olympics, and I still need to repeat them. Well, you should, bring your water bottle. You should bring your snacks. Your breakfast is not filling enough. So like even after very like highly trained athlete, and some are like medalists for world championship, you always have to bring back the very, very basic stuff. You're like, well, okay, these athletes are on the national team at the end. So what they're doing is probably very good, even if they're not, oh, I forgot my water bottle, or I did not recover properly. I starved yesterday because I forgot to have my breakfast. So somehow it makes sense, but it's always there. Always have to repeat.
How common is that they would starve or whatever, like in terms of not preparing for on the nutrition side? Is that a common thing? Does that happen regularly?
I'd say like, when you give recommendations, regardless if you're an athlete or normal person, let's call it like
Civilian,
that, or
yeah.
not non-athlete.
Right.
Well, you're very motivated for 2-3 weeks. You're doing it, and you bring your water bottle, but then after you might just get busy with other things. And when you're an athlete, you don't just train. You might go to school. You might have to travel a lot. There's a lot on their mind. They don't just do like trains for sports. So we need to be the one being like, hey, let's make you maybe a little list, or just remember this and this, because it's super important. Because, athletes will come and be like, oh, I'm so tired. Right. Yeah, well, are you sleeping properly? Oh, okay. You're forgetting to recover for the past 2-3 weeks. You've put that aside. So just helping the athlete around those very, very basic things, instead of, oh, I'm just gonna have this caffeine pill because I'm so exhausted and I'm so tired. No, there's a lot of things that we should cover first.
For sure. And I think one of the questions people really want to know right now, obviously that the holidays finished, it's January. A lot of people have been celebrating the holidays, and I would imagine some have put on some weight. And one of the questions they want to know is, what sort of nutrition advice do you have for people who are getting back to exercising and quote unquote healthy eating after the holidays?
Because that's a very good question. There's multiple ways to answer it, but I'd say people need to find the way that makes them happy when they eat. So if you don't like to eat chicken, broccoli, and sweet potato, you don't have to eat that. You can eat some pasta, some chili, and a lot of rice, and still lose weight if you're happy. And of course, you're creating a caloric deficit, so you're eating less. So perhaps during the holiday, was there a lot of alcohol, a lot of sweets, desserts? Like, can we move this a bit on the side and focus on, okay, do I have my carbohydrate in my plate? Do I have my vegetables? Do I have my protein, at least the palm of my hand? So that can be chicken, beef, pork, it can be beans, it can be tofu if we're leaning on the side of going more for vegetarian sources of protein. But a person should not focus on, oh, I'm going to cut diet, or I'm going to cut calories just because someone said it on Instagram. Or I don't know, this guy is doing keto diet, so he lost 50 pounds and he's all over the social media. I'm going to do it. So everybody needs to find what makes them happy. There's not like a perfect way to eat, but you should not have pizza every day. Like, you can have pizza every week, but just should not be your main choice of meals. And And for the exercise, I'd say it's the same thing. Find exercise that makes you happy. Now with the pandemic, we have so many opportunities to go like online and virtual classes.
Right.
There's like virtual bike sessions. You can now connect your treadmill to some apps online, and then you just run and you see yourself run at the same time. So people definitely need to maybe invest in those equipment, because it's awesome. Like it's very, very great what's been happening because of the pandemic on the exercise things.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and people need to be patient as well. Like they cannot expect to lose 12 pounds in a week. They should expect to lose 12 pounds in probably 6 months, and to find a way that, they make changes slowly, gradually, and they continue, and it makes them happy. So that's an important part as well.
Catherine, that's an interesting point, and I kind of want to just speak about that a bit more in terms of, because there's so much information online. You mentioned, social media, Instagram, and a lot of quote unquote influencer types and so-called experts who are, sharing all this knowledge. And there's so many different fads as far as diets, right? Because there's so many of them out there. My question to you is, as a professional in this field of nutrition, when you see these ads and all these fads and so on, what's the number one thing that comes to mind for you as someone who can, detect the potential BS in the information? Well, what comes to mind?
Well, first of all, if they want your money, there's a catch, that's for sure. Yesterday I was going to watch a video on YouTube, and you have all these ads at the beginning, and they were presenting me a new plant that you put in water and you mix it, and then you drink that, and then you can lose 50 pounds in 2 months. So I was watching the video and I was like, oh my God, what is this? But I can totally imagine someone that is in distress and really looking to lose weight. And so, I clicked because they said click to know more. So I'm going to know more. They want $50 per month. I can buy a recipe book. I can buy a bunch of stuff, and it's like a subscription. So I'm like, okay, you just want my money. That's like $500 per year. You multiply that by a couple of million of people that can be fooled in that, and you make a lot of money. You make people believe that it's magical, it's fast. So when you get all of these in an ad, this should be like, it's too good to be true. They just it's not going to work. It's not worth it. Because if it doesn't come with a caloric restriction, like you can eat all the plant diluted in water. If you're not making improvement on your own to reduce calories, then you can spend all the money you want, but it's not going to work.
Can you explain that caloric? Just explain it to us as far as the deficit and so on, for some who may not know what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So your body needs a certain amount of energy, which we also call calories. So the energy will come from protein, carbohydrates, fat. So food that we eat brings energy into the body. So we calculate a certain amount of calories for women. A woman that doesn't do anything in a day, just lies for 24 hours, will burn anywhere from 1,500 calories to 2,000 calories, depending on how tall and how muscular they are. For men, it's going to be higher because you're usually taller, more muscular. So we can go to 2,000 to 2,005. This is a range. We should not remember this. Oh, I'm going to start counting 1,500 calories.
I just started, not kidding.
No, man. But it's really if you eat this much and you're very sedentary, you don't exercise, your body weight will maintain. You won't lose, you won't gain. Now, if you eat more than this and you still don't move, then you will start to gain weight, because then you're in a surplus of calories. So you're not like managing that well, and then you will either put on weight or lose if you're eating less than that. So it's basically just that little work to do. And there's some very, very good studies showing that it doesn't matter if you want to eat a high carb diet or a high fat diet or vice versa, low carb, low fat. As long as you work on the calories and you eat a bit less, 200, 300 calories less per day, you lose the exact same amount of weight. So some people often will want to cut pasta, rice. Let's take off all the potatoes. No more sweets for me. You don't have to do that. You just need to focus on portion sizes and work on the long term.
Now, personal question for you. How has becoming a nutritionist changed your opinion and relationship with food and the social culture of eating? If so, has it changed? How has it changed it?
Yeah. I guess when you're in university, I remember some classes where we would learn all the calories, protein, we would know them like that. You know, we were programmed to know all the food almost by heart. And I'm a very geeky person. I like data, I like numbers. So for me, it was like, oh, this is so awesome. But for others, I could see that it was missing a little bit with them, making them a bit more fragile and be a bit more aware of, oh, this has a lot of fat. You know, I remember a teacher would say, you got to be careful with avocados because there's 300 calories and it's a lot of fat. And I was like, well, avocado
fat,
is delicious.
Right.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's tasty. So, you know, there were some little things when I remember in university, I got out of there, and when you start to work, you have this impression that you don't know anything, because you have the occasion and the opportunity to meet people and to really see like how they're struggling. And I think the possibility to sort of adapt to everybody that's in front of you, because there are some people that, well, they don't want to eat this, but then there are other people that are like, oh my God, I love this. I cannot cut this out of my food. So you find a way to help the person be like, okay, well, we'll make room for pizza. We'll make room for your chocolate. Like, let's do it. So you stay happy through that process. But I sense that, I think social media probably does that. People are looking for information on social media because it's accessible, it's easy, it's the first thing that people go for. And you know, you get so much crappy information that people get very anxious around food now, and they're just so confused. So it's creating this anxiety that's totally unnecessary around food. So for us dietitian, it's great because we have a lot of work to do, so we're always busy. But for the community, and especially like athletes, you know, athletes like to post what they eat, they like to take pictures, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's fun. I like to see what they're eating, but you're going to see this whole community of, oh, he eats that, she eats that, should I do it too? So they're questioning a lot of, am I doing the right thing? You know, so I think social media brought a lot of great things, but at the same time, some negative things that we need to be aware and continue to educate athletes and non-athletes, of course.
That's interesting because I'm almost curious to know, and I guess maybe we'll get on this topic later, but eating disorders, you know, with a lot of, even with elite level athletes, I'm wondering if that's common, you know, when you have someone who's so focused on performance. I would imagine they're probably, you know, they're very particular about how they train. They're particularly have a whole routine as to how they go about their day. And, you know, anyways, we'll get into that in a bit. The next question I actually wanted to ask was, specifically, you've professionally worked with various elite level athletes, from Olympians, Paralympians, and so on. What role does proper nutrition play in enabling elite athletes to perform at their best? Et si tu peux répondre à cette question en français, s'il vous plaît. So the role of nutrition and performance.
Ça peut changer la vie d'un athlète là, complètement.
Changer la vie.
Ça peut changer la vie d'un athlète complètement. Je vais juste je peux prendre deux exemples. Quand on est dans des grands jeux, par exemple, moi, quand je suis aux Jeux olympiques avec des athlètes, j'ai quand même un rôle qui n'est pas nécessairement avec un sport individuellement. J'ai un rôle vraiment pour encadrer tous les sports de l'équipe du Canada. Donc, des athlètes qui n'ont pas accès à une nutritionniste vont venir, par exemple, rencontrer la nutritionniste, ils ont des questions. Par exemple, ça m'est arrivé, une athlète, dernière minute, devait perdre 3 kilos dans 48 heures. Donc, j'étais un peu étonnée, comment ça se fait, on est au jeu, qu'est-ce qui se passe, comment ça se fait que tu n'as pas pensé à ça, mais de tout passer rapidement parce qu'il fallait faire ça très vite. J'ai aucun historique sur cette athlète-là, je ne savais pas qu'est-ce qu'elle avait fait dans le passé, qu'est-ce qui fonctionnait. Donc,
Quel
il fallait
sport?
agir.
C'était quel sport?
Ben, je préférerais garder ça confidentiel.
Parfait.
C'est sûr que si l'athlète écoute, elle va tout de suite se reconnaître.
Okay.
Mais tout ça pour dire qu'il a tout expliqué en peu de temps, toutes les étapes de son alimentation. Qu'est-ce qu'il fallait qu'elle retire, comment il fallait qu'elle coupe ses liquides, comment il fallait qu'elle récupère après la pesée. Donc, on était en contact très, très régulièrement, puis ça avait vraiment changé sa vie. On a continué à travailler ensemble pendant plusieurs années. Puis je veux dire, pour n'importe quel athlète, ça peut faire une énorme différence quand ils ne sont pas au courant. Les sports d'endurance, par exemple, quelqu'un qui ne connaît pas le secret de vraiment, peut-être pas s'empiffrer parce qu'il y a une façon de le faire correctement, mais de manger une bonne quantité de glucides dans les 3 jours avant une grosse compétition de vélo, que ce soit du vélo de route, vélo de montagne, course à pied, marathon, ces épreuves-là. Il y en a qui ne voient pas il y en a qui n'ont jamais fait ça, ils pensent qu'ils le font correctement, mais quand tu leur expliques, maintenant, mais ça te prend une banane de plus, ça te prend 3-4 grosses dattes de plus, tu vas te rajouter une grosse cuillère de riz, puis tu vas voir dans ta course, tu vas sentir là, que tu es capable d'en donner. Je veux dire, c'est des choses qui ne sont pas très complexes, là, ce dont on discute, mais l'alimentation, autant bien se préparer. Il y en a qui vont devoir s'hydrater correctement, peut-être aller rajouter des glucides pendant à chaque heure, d'aller chercher des gels, des jujubes, des sources de glucides très, très sucrées pour vraiment maintenir la glycémie très élevée. Puis la récupération par après, parce que des fois, ce n'est pas fini, ça se poursuit dans les journées qui suivent. Ce n'est pas le temps d'aller chercher un sac de chips ou de boire une bière, tu sais, qu'ils vont peut-être donner à la fin d'une course, parce que c'est commandité souvent par des bières, les grosses courses d'endurance. Peut-être pas la meilleure chose à prendre. Donc, juste leur expliquer, tu sais, ben, attends avant d'aller prendre ta bière. Tu peux la prendre parce qu'ils vont te la donner, mais peut-être focus lait au chocolat, une grosse tranche de pain aux bananes, ta banane, tu bois un grand verre de jus, tu attends quelques heures. Après ça, peut-être que tu pourras passer à la bière. Mais est-ce bien nécessaire?
Ça sent comme il y a beaucoup de communication que le rôle de communication est vraiment important avec les athlètes. Puis, as far as openness, est-ce qu'ils écoutent tout le temps ou est-ce qu'ils sont comme un peu plus apprehensive to your advice? Because the example you just provided was really interesting. You know, so you gave us an example where it changed this individual's life as far as you know, she's at the games. She needed to lose, you said 3 kilos, right?
Yeah.
In
48 hours.
Yeah. Puis elle a fait ça. Puis, you know, her performance was there. And the question is, it's like, how open are athletes to receiving professional nutrition advice? Because I'm going to assume that, you know, you're dealing with elite level competitors, people who are competing at the highest level of their sports. Obviously, we're talking we're about judo here in this interview, but it's interesting with you because you've worked with all sorts of different athletes, and you've come across different I'm sure different personalities. So I guess the question is, how open are they to professional advice from nutritionists?
So it's a very, very good question, because it depends who is sending them. Are they coming on their own? If they're coming by themselves because they have goals, I want to, let's say, put on muscle, I want to lose weight, I want to improve my body composition, I would feel better, I know my performance would be so much better, they will listen to you. Like everything you say, they listen, they will execute, they will message you, they will send you pictures, they will do whatever you ask them to do. I don't necessarily like ask them a lot of homework, like, oh, you need to write down everything, you need to calculate. I try to avoid that as much as possible because it's like a burden. I prefer to meet the athlete more often and follow up. So those usually they're in, they will want to come every week, every 2 weeks, and they're really into the process. If the coach is sending them, or a parents is like, you're not eating well, we need to go see the dietitian. I have a lot of work to do as a first impression to make sure that, nutrition should be on the top of your list because you are not eating properly. Let's do it step by step. These are the things that you should work on. This is a long list, so let's try this one and then slowly go down the list. But most of the time when they come in the first meeting, they're not very chatty, not very interested to be there. And it's my role to, explain to them what nutrition can bring. And then if there's a parent there, sometimes there's a little fight also. So I'm like, okay.
That's fascinating. It's almost like you're wearing multiple hats. Obviously, you're a nutritionist, but you're almost like a coach, and almost like a personal coach, right? In terms of coaching and motivating people. But you're would it be fair to say you're almost like a therapist as well, like a food therapist and behavioral sort of therapist interacting with the client? It's really interesting. Do you plan on ever writing a book about your career and all the various winter and summer Olympic games you've attended?
That's a great idea.
Because I looked at your resume.
I need to find time to do that.
I could imagine. I looked at your resume on your website, and there's a bunch of pictures of you all over the world, with all these different teams, and the images speak for themselves, right? In one frame, we can see you doing this and that, and having quite, I would imagine, quite the impact on these athletes, be it individuals or team-based sports, and their performance as their nutritionist. I hope you do write that book. I know time is hard to find, but it's one of those things, like if you get a diary going.
It's a very great idea. I would have tons of stories to write, some experience with some athletes, because we usually we grow together. Like I help the athlete, but also the athlete feeds me a lot of information so I can understand better, ask the right questions. They travel, and then they get better and better. So sometimes they start on the provincial team, the national team, they're selected on the world champion team. So you can really progress with the athlete. So it's a teamwork. It's really showing the athlete, I'm here to support you, I'm here to help. These are the things that I can do, but not necessarily push the athlete like, oh, you have to come next week again, you have to step on the scale. Like it's really to find the right balance of how to help the athlete properly without creating a burden for them.
Right. And it's interesting too, because you see their progression over the years, right? They're coming into INS and you're tracking their progression over time. You're seeing them develop as competitors and individuals. And that sort of insight is interesting because we don't tend to hear much from, I'm generalizing here, we don't tend to hear much from the professional, like the nutritionists on board. Usually it tends to be the coaches, and fellow athletes, right? But never, unfortunately, I think it's a very important part of the formula. So this is it's great that we're interviewing you here, and and we're
it's great indeed. It's a great conversation.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. I have a few other questions to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
As a sports nutritionist and former elite level athlete yourself, what's your approach to working with coaches, teams, athletes, and meeting their goals? I know this is a big question, but if you can give us a few examples, particular to combat sports, judo, obviously, or non-combat sports, we'd like to know what's your methodology.
Well,
and if you can answer, si tu peux répondre à la question.
En français, OK. Je pense que la partie la plus importante, c'est de discuter avec les entraîneurs, de discuter avec les athlètes, de comprendre s'ils ont fait appel à la nutritionniste, quelles sont les problématiques. Est-ce que vous avez des problèmes? Y a-t-il des choses qui ne fonctionnent pas bien? Y a-t-il des choses qui fonctionnent bien? Je me souviens, quand je suis arrivée avec l'équipe de judo, ça coupait du poids, là. Puis c'était normal, mais ça coupait beaucoup de poids. On parle de 10 kilos, 7 kilos, des grosses quantités de poids. Puis c'était normal parce que les autres gars dans les autres pays, ils le faisaient. Et bien aussi, c'est de voir comme, OK, mais comment tu coupes ton poids? OK, tu coupes tout à la dernière minute. Qu'est-ce que tu manges présentement? Donc, quand je suis arrivée, là, c'était wow, OK, il y a de la job à faire. Donc, moi, j'étais excitée, j'étais contente. Mais j'étais aussi perçue comme une police. Donc, c'est tranquillement de changer peut-être un peu les pratiques. Mettons un athlète qu'on les pèse tout le lundi. Mais d'expliquer, faites attention, le lundi, ça envoie un mauvais signal à l'athlète. On ne veut pas nécessairement les mettre sur la balance le lundi juste parce qu'administrativement parlant, par contre, par exemple, c'est facile. Il y a la fin de semaine, on veut que les athlètes puissent se reposer, en profiter. Sinon, il y en a qui vont peut-être couper un peu, puis on veut essayer d'éviter ça. Donc, d'amener les pratiques qu'on voit, de donner notre opinion aux entraîneurs, puis aussi laisser l'opportunité aux entraîneurs de nous véhiculer que comme nous autres, dans notre sport, on coupe du poids, donc ça fait partie du sport. Donc, c'est d'éduquer comme il faut. Je comprends parfaitement. S'il faut couper du poids, ça peut être très bien et ne pas nuire à la performance quand c'est bien fait. Mais maintenant, j'aimerais ça peut-être qu'on essaye telle chose. Donc, tu sais, c'est d'y aller vraiment, vraiment tranquillement, de ne pas s'imposer puis de faire comme, voyons, non, on va pas faire ça comme ça. De ne pas avoir une approche très, moi, j'arrive là, puis c'est de même qu'on fait ça. Parce que malheureusement, en séance du sport, des fois, c'est pas pour être méchant, c'est toute une bonne volonté, on a des connaissances, on veut faire ça comme ça, sauf que le sport est comme, non, là, nous autres, on fait ça depuis des années, puis ça fonctionne super bien. Tu sais. Donc, d'être vraiment à l'écoute des besoins du sport, ça, je pense que c'est l'étape principale. Judo, les sports de combat, à l'époque, je ne connaissais pas ça, donc je voulais observer un peu plus les entraînements, aller voir les combats, comment ça se passe, de pouvoir estimer la dépense énergétique, de voir que comme, OK, ça dépense beaucoup d'énergie, ces athlètes-là. Là. Quand ils perdent du poids, ils ne peuvent pas manger juste le 1500 calories dont on parlait tantôt, puis 2000 calories. Tu sais, ça prend beaucoup plus d'énergie. Donc, c'est d'éduquer aussi, puis d'amener cet aspect-là là, de la pratique du sport. Donc, s'exposer au sport, d'apprendre beaucoup de choses par rapport au sport, de se forcer à aller voir des entraînements, être sur le bord d'une piscine ou d'être sur le bord d'une patinoire, puis de vraiment prendre des notes puis d'observer. Je pense que ça, c'est la principale étape, puis d'écouter aussi. Des fois, en judo, on a certains accrochages avec les entraîneurs où moi, je vais lever ma main puis je vais dire, au niveau médical, cet athlète-là, ça commence à être vraiment, vraiment comme limite. Il faudrait qu'il monte de catégorie de poids. C'est difficile mentalement, il se restreint beaucoup, il est enfermé chez lui ou chez elle. Mais j'ai l'entraîneur qui va me dire, internationalement, quand on regarde au niveau international, s'il monte de catégorie ou s'il change de catégorie, c'est fini. Il va se faire mal ou il va se faire toujours sortir. Donc, des fois, il faut être à l'écoute. Pas juste nécessairement se fier à ce que nous, on voit au niveau médical. C'est sûr, il faut en discuter avec l'athlète, il faut en discuter avec l'entraîneur, mais il faut être vraiment comme faire un travail d'équipe.
Really interesting. Pourrais-tu juste répondre à cette question en anglais?
In
Puis,
English?
oui, en anglais, s'il vous plaît, puis je vais te poser des follow-up questions.
Okay. So I'll try to remember everything.
I know you covered a lot there. It was excellent. It was excellent. You want me to ask the question again, or
No. I'll try to remember everything I said. I think I'll be good. So what's my approach when it comes to like working with coaches, teams, athlete, like when you, let's say, start working with a new team, I think the first thing to do is to really sit down with the coaches, and to identify if there are problems, if there are issues on the nutrition side, and if they called me, like what can I do to help? Like what are they looking for in terms of nutrition, or body composition, or to like follow up or educate the athletes, like what do they need? And I think it's really important to listen to what they have to say. Us sometimes as a sports scientist, we're really like, oh, we have these ideas, this is what we're going to do, and it doesn't necessarily fit what the sport would need. So it's really, really important that top priority is what does the sport need, and then we come with what we can bring, and not like, because it can create some conflicts if we're coming in with like, we know much more than you, so let's do it our way. So this is really something to avoid.
It sounds like you have you probably have some stories to share around that clash, and I'm not asking you to share that, but I would imagine it's a common occurrence having that clash when you have the sports scientists, as you described them, interacting with the coaches.
And this is why academics sometimes does not really match with a high sport level environment, because like academic, they want to do things specifically, we want this, we want to use your athletes, but then does the sport really need it? Is it going to affect their training capacity, the training intensity? You're going to have to change some of the volume probably. So like this cannot interfere with what the athlete and coaches are focusing on. Like you need to work around this if you want to do research, for instance. So that's why these sometimes they clash and they don't agree with each other, because they need to answer a question of the sport, like what do they need? And on more of the athlete side, I think it's really to show that we're there to support them. We're not there to force them to do anything. We're not there to sometimes athletes come and see the dietitian and they're scared because they're like, well, she's going to put me on a diet and she's going to make menus and I'm going to have to like fill up a report. And that's absolutely not what we want to do. We want to like make the athlete comfortable and educate them around what they really need to be better and perform better. So yeah, I think it's exposing yourself to the training environment. So go by the pool, go by the ice rink, put on a winter coat in your boots, and then go to the pool in sandals. So change the environment quickly. Yeah, I think it's really to be open, listening. And another thing about this, like to listen to what the sport has to say is, on the medical side, sometimes in combat sports, we have information like this is the limit, like the athlete should move up. They're really struggling. They need to starve themselves. They're home. They're not seeing their friends. They're isolating because they can continue to make weight. Otherwise, they get a bit more stressed and anxious if they eat out. And you're going to have the coach telling you, well, on the international side of things, this athlete is, if they move up, they're done. They won't be able to perform, or it's going to take like 2 or more Olympic cycles until they get really, really stronger and they can really perform if they can perform. So it's that balance of, okay, I see what you mean. Let's keep working the best we can. But, at some point, if on the medical side, we see an athlete that's really, really struggling, then it's our role to communicate that with the coaches.
You mentioned earlier on when you first were when you were first interacting with the judo players, you were surprised to see how much weight they were cutting. In some instances, I think you said 10 kilos, 7 kilos, and so on.
Yeah.
Speak to us about that, because it's pretty common, and even obviously in judo and wrestling, it's even more. I would imagine, and on the professional side of things, when we speak of like mixed martial arts, for even it's ridiculous at times. You hear stories of people cutting, 20 pounds,
Yeah.
25 pounds, and it's through just essentially, I'm generalizing here, but dehydrating themselves. What are your thoughts on that as someone who's, what are your thoughts on that?
So mixed martial arts, I worked a couple of years with a little group. It's actually Nicolas Gil who said, why don't you just go investigate what they're doing? They seem to be cutting a lot of weight. Just go ahead and have a look. And by pure coincidence, 3 days later, I had an MMA coach calling me and say, oh, I heard about you through boxing. I heard you can help athletes cut weight, and I need help because, there's a big match coming. And I'm like, perfect. How much weight did you guys have to lose? Oh, it's 20 to 50 pounds. Let's give it a try,
20 to 50.
Well, depending on their weight class.
Right. Like,
I think one guy had to lose 60 or 65 pounds. He did it, but I said, this is the last time you're doing it. You need to move up 170 pound, because like 150 pound it's severely dangerous for you.
Right.
I would say that in these environments, they're not very well educated around body composition. They look at an athlete height. You're small, you're going to do 125. You're a bit taller, you're going to do the 135, but you should try 125 because you would make more money. There's money also implicated through professional sports. And back in the days also, when I first started with judo, there was not that necessarily that body composition evaluation that was there. So something that you can do with like skin folds, or now these days we can use a DEXA, which is like a scan that will really evaluate more precisely how your tissue are distributed. So in doubt, like you can use skin folds, bioelectrical impedance that will give you an estimation of the fat mass, the muscle mass. So when you have those results, and you see that an athlete, let's say in a 73 kilo weight division, has 75 kilo of fat-free mass, so you're pulling out all the fat mass, and that athlete has more muscle than the actual weight class, then that's a big problem. That means the athlete is cutting so much weight. And so you need to raise, okay, red flag, you have more muscle than your actual weight class. So you need to cut like so much food, water, you need to restrict yourself, lose muscle every time. You should try to move up. So when you bring this information to an athlete, to a coach, you can show them like, this is really, really dangerous. And then you can bring, blood work. So we've been doing a little bit more of medical evaluation over the years. So we try to do at least 2 blood work per year. We look at iron, vitamin D, we look at kidney markers. So sometimes, we follow up that over the years. And if we see that an athlete keeps dropping and it's combined to a lot of weight cutting, then, these are good arguments to be like, you would be so much happier and stronger if you would move up. But it can take a lot of time for an athlete to make that decision, or even a coach to be like, yeah, performance are extremely affected by their weight cut. They cannot like perform at their best, where if they're 7 and 8 kilo heavier that they normally maintain. They can push to training and they can do really great fights. But when you're cutting so much water, at some point you're losing this ability to train at a very high intensity. So it's a nice balance of things. You have to constantly communicate that to the athlete, especially if they're growing also. They're young, they cannot always stay in the same weight class. But moving up means that you're changing opponents, you're changing the way you fight. It's going to be different. So it's a whole new way of fighting. So it's a lot of challenges, a lot of questions and discussions.
For sure. And it almost sounds, as you were saying, that it's your by moving up in weight, one has to completely reinvent themselves, right?
Absolutely.
As to how they fight, and even in some instances gain more strength and I think you mentioned earlier too that, I mean, for the most part, people are fighting time, right? Especially if they're looking at making it to the Olympics once or twice. It's a game of it's time management, I suppose. What would you say?
Like a great point also about that is Olympic selections start 2 years before the Olympics, and if you decide to change weight class 1 year before games, you start all over again. You need to get all your points. So, there's that first 2 year of the Olympic cycle that you work with the athlete. If you see that it's starting to be difficult, those last 2 years, this is where you should maybe make a decision, but it is extremely hard.
May I ask, in that situation, in that scenario that you mentioned there, as far, and again, it's a general question, when it comes to issues around weight for elite level judo players and other combat sports athletes, is it easier for one gender over the other to stay at a certain weight, or is there one gender that has more, excuse me, has more of an advantage when it comes to retaining weight over the years as they get older, when they go from 18 to 20 to 22 and so on?
It's a very good question. I don't think gender makes a difference. If you have to grow, you have to grow. You're going to put on muscle mass, which will, of course, increases total body weight. Some athletes over the years get also leaner just because they train hard, they eat well, they sleep well. Hopefully, they all do that. So they do get leaner over the years. So if you're putting more muscle mass, getting leaner, at some point you have to make a decision to change weight class. And sometimes some of the most important competition are right after the holidays. So you get a break, you get some time off, you get perhaps a little bit extra calories. You don't necessarily gain fat during the holidays. If you do, then it's fine. Like, you should enjoy good food. It's once a year. But it's sometimes a part where younger athletes will put on a lot of muscle. They will grow during that time of year. And if they're already cutting 4 or 5 kilos, are they going to have to cut 7 kilos in 2 weeks after the holidays? Because they have it's the Canadian Championships, or, if you look at different combat sports, sometimes the most important competition is right after the holidays. And it's just because the calendar is done this way. There's no other place to put it. So it's not like, oh, we're going to weigh you after the holidays. It's totally not that. It's just, that's how it's happening. So it's a good question for the gender. I don't think female or male are more impacted by that change in weight class. I think it's one athlete individually that we have to look. But it's a good question. It would be a great research project, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess the follow-up to that, and we don't have to go there, but the follow-up to that is in terms of athlete longevity, but by weight class. It would seem that for the most part, like, heavier athletes might stick around longer in some combat sports than people who are much lighter. If it's mixed martial arts or if it's judo, even it's like as they progress in the age and they grow older, they can put on more weight and move up.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And also those who like cut decent amount of weight that is like feasible, because you can have 10, 15 competitions per year. So that's a lot of weight cutting. Those who cut weight well and don't overdo the weight cut, who don't get sad, have to restrict themselves. Because the thing is that when you restrict yourself, you put on also a lot of weight after a competition, because you're like, oh, finally I can eat. So you eat. And over the years, well, you can increase body weight by having those habits of restricting. And then, finally I can eat, and have some behaviors where on the long term, it will affect your motivation to just do judo, because the focus changes around judo is like, I'm going to fight tonight to lose weight. Let's go burn calories, where you want actually your focus to be on, I want to improve my performance. I want to get stronger tonight. I'm going to fight this guy, or this girl, and not be like, oh, I need to burn calories, So that's a shift. Sometimes I'm going to open up to the athlete about and be like, when they cut a lot of weight on a short amount of time, you get that, I'm not going to say like depression, but you get like mood swings.
Right.
You see that their motivation is not the same as when they were 15 years old or 18 in the same weight class. So
it's interesting because that even leads to another series of questions around in terms of mental health, I suppose, and even eating disorders. We don't have to go down that road per se, but this question here is might encompass some of that. What would you say are some of the unique challenges, if any, faced by elite athletes when it comes to nutrition, the pressure of elite level competition, and leading a balanced life? And if you could answer in French first, that would be great.
Très, très bonne question. C'est sûr que être un athlète de haut niveau, ça apporte quand même des défis supplémentaires. Il y a plus de pression, il y a plus de compétition, il y a des tournois qui sont plus exigeants, il y a des sélections, il y a tout un processus de carding. Donc, tout ça, c'est quand on est un jeune athlète, on aspire on veut vraiment moi, je veux faire Team Canada, c'est ça que je veux faire, moi, je rêve aux Jeux olympiques. Mais c'est important d'expliquer à l'athlète toutes les étapes. Il y a les championnats québécois, c'est pas que c'est pas difficile, mais c'est pas une finale au championnat du monde. Que tu fais la moindre petite erreur ou tu réfléchis un petit peu trop, puis fini, ciao, bye. Donc, c'est sûr que c'est pas tous les athlètes qui tolèrent bien cette pression supplémentaire. C'est sûr que si l'athlète n'est pas heureux dans le sport, il faut essayer de trouver pourquoi. Qu'est-ce qui fait? OK, tu es stressé dans les compétitions, tu as un coach qui te stresse, tu ne t'entends pas très bien avec les autres athlètes. OK, tu as une situation personnelle qui fait que ça t'apporte beaucoup de stress, ta situation financière qu'il faut peut-être que tu aies chercher de l'aide. Donc, il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de choses qui peuvent affecter la santé mentale ou le bien-être mental d'un athlète. Une des façons que les athlètes trouvent, puis ça mène des fois à des troubles alimentaires, ils veulent essayer d'avoir un certain contrôle sur leur vie parce ils sentent qu'ils perdent un peu le contrôle. Donc, une façon de contrôler, c'est le poids. C'est très facile à contrôler. Tu arrêtes de manger, ça diminue. Tu manges un petit peu trop, ça augmente. Donc, souvent les athlètes vont pas nécessairement s'en rendre compte. C'est parfois très inconscient, mais ils vont se mettre à contrôler un peu plus ce qu'ils mangent, les choix qu'ils vont faire. Ils vont se mettre aussi à en parler un peu plus. Donc, il y a des signes qu'on peut repérer quand on est en présence de peut-être l'athlète ne va pas très bien au niveau mentalement, des problèmes de sommeil, des problèmes de motivation, a trop de stress présentement. Donc, c'est un cheminement qui est quand même progressif. Mais c'est sûr que nous, les nutritionnistes, c'est sûr on va observer des signes un peu plus marquants. Là. On va essayer de comprendre un peu plus, OK, mais qu'est-ce que tu veux dire? Pourquoi là, que tu t'es mis à compter tes calories ou pourquoi est-ce que tu as coupé le riz? Tu sais, pourquoi tu as enlevé ça? Donc, gentiment, d'essayer de comprendre qu'est-ce qui se passe, puis de réaliser que ben, le problème n'est certainement pas juste au niveau du sport. Dans l'environnement du sport, il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de choses qui gravitent autour de l'athlète qui lui font, qui l'empêchent de mettre trop de son focus sur le sport. Il y a trop de choses là, présentement qui sont autour de l'athlète. Donc, il faut vraiment aider l'athlète à ce niveau-là. Là.
It's almost like a holistic approach, right? In terms of how, if I can say, if I can use that term in terms of how you're assessing the athlete, it's the entire picture. Now you've been working with the provincial team and the national judo team. That's the Quebec provincial team, I should say, and the national judo team since 2006. What's it like providing sports nutrition advice to elite level judo competitors?
It's great. I would say I'm super happy to be working with the sport for all these years. I would not change this sport. I think not necessarily just like the judo, but the combat sports environment, I'd say is very, very exciting to work with, probably because there's the weight making practice in the sport. So it does come with more questions and motivation around food and how I can cut weight better or how I can manage my weight better, or, there's just more excitement and questions around food. So I think with judo, especially Judo Quebec, when they arrive younger, over the years, there was a very nice integration of the athlete where when they would arrive, they would be in contact with all the specialists that will work with the national team. So we try to keep everybody quite close because when they progress, they're not like, oh, I need to work with someone else. And so a very nice program of integrating the athlete, like, okay, you're gonna see the dietitian. You had trouble making weight in your last 2 competitions. So let's see what's happening. Let's go see the dietitian, do body composition, evaluate your food intake, make sure that everything is under control. And if you need to move up, then, perhaps it's time now to do it. So I think there's a nice program and there's a nice steps that we've put in place for these younger athletes that are coming and helping them to progress over time. Also, they see that I'm not, je suis pas méchante, là. I'm not, I don't know how to say that in English, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not the police. Right. They will eat candies and chocolate and pizza if they want to. There's absolutely no problem with that. It's just being cautious about when and how often.
How important is it at that young age for at the provincial level team, I suppose, for them to have access to these professionals who educate them on sports nutrition? Like how important is that for their development as elite level athletes?
I would say that when they're in their club or in other, in their club, they're mostly with their other partners, training partners, coach. So they're in this environment where it's quite close. And, if I look at judo, they come from des régions, Sept-Îles, Jonquière, Chicoutimi. They come from parts of Quebec that are a bit more isolated. If you look at Montreal, which is a big city. So coming to the national center for them, it can be quite big. It can be quite challenging. Some miss home. Some are not used to this. They used to go play with friends after school and not necessarily be in a big city. So I think being in contact with us, it helps them to have a bit more of a structure and understand like what they need to put in place if they want to train on the national team or with the national team, because sometimes they come and they train 3 times a week and they've never really lifted weights. Now when they come to the center, they might do 4 or 5 randonnees or training plus 2 or 3 sessions of weight training. So helping them doing that transition, or discussing with the coach and the strength and conditioning, which are usually like very, very listening and very helpful about perhaps this athlete will need a bit more of an adaptation with the training. There's school also involved, so he just cannot do 5 trainings per night. So can we adapt this for an athlete so we don't burn them and we don't overtrain them? So, so that's exposing the athlete to what the volume and intensity that they need to train in the national center, but helping them progress, I feel, is why we're here for, and supporting everybody through this.
That's awesome. Now, from a sports nutrition perspective, what's the recommended nutrition plan for an elite judo competitor, and how would it differ from that of an artistic swimmer or a marathon runner?
That's a good question. I'd say my recommendations will actually be the same. They will eat the same kind of food. They will need to fuel with the same, not necessarily the same portion sizes. A 90 kilo versus a 50 kilo will not eat the same portions, but they will eat the same food, the same things,
right?
Just not the same amounts. I think the main difference for a judo athlete is really the preparation for a competition part. They will probably not have a big bowl of pasta like the artistic swimmer should the evening before a major competition, or the marathon runner who would have 2 plates, before. Judo athlete, well, unless they're under their weight class, go for it. But if you have weight to lose, having a big bowl of pasta is not necessarily your best choice. After you weigh in, not before.
Right.
I think this would be the main difference. The preparation for the competition would be different for all kinds of sports, but specifically for combat sports, there is a part where they need to cut weight, reduce maybe their portions, eat differently, versus other athletes who will go for a lot of carbohydrates. I think that would be my answer. Very good question.
Thank you. I actually have 3 more questions. I really appreciate your time. I know we're going slightly...
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
We're going slightly over, but if you don't mind, this one here is an interesting one. It's you're a doctoral student at the Université de Sherbrooke. Your focus is on how to optimize fast weight loss technique in combat sports. Please tell us about this topic and some of the various techniques used by combat sports athletes, such as judo players and so on, in making weight. And I know this is a big one. This is a big question. So maybe we can interview you again on just this particular question, because I would imagine... Of course.
I can still answer.
Sure, bien sûr. Vas-y. And if you could do it in French.
En français, OK. Donc, ce projet de doctorat a débuté encore une fois avec une conversation avec Nicolas Gill, des entraîneurs. La demande ou la discussion tournait autour du fait que quand la pesée a changé en 2014, donc en judo, avant, les athlètes étaient pesés 2-3 heures avant le premier combat. Ensuite, en 2014, ça a changé la veille. Donc, au fil des années, ce qu'on remarquait, c'est qu'il y a des athlètes qui semblaient couper beaucoup plus de poids, profiter du fait que maintenant, on a plus de temps pour récupérer. Donc, on en profite pour aussi peut-être couper plus de poids. Et donc, au fil du temps, c'était d'améliorer les pratiques de perte de poids rapide, vraiment comme éduquer les athlètes. Aussi est venue la conversation de « va donc voir ce qui se passe dans le MMA ». Il y a du water loading, ils s'enroulent dans des serviettes, ça a de l'air intéressant, ils ont de l'air de couper beaucoup de poids. Ça a de l'air de fonctionner. Et donc, je suis allée investiguer ce qui se passait. C'était une catastrophe. D'ailleurs, on pourra en reparler avec plaisir de tout ce qui se passe dans ce milieu-là. J'espère que les choses ont beaucoup changé depuis, mais ça a été une grosse, grosse phase d'éducation pour ces athlètes-là avec qui j'ai pu les suivre. Mais aussi, j'ai découvert la technique du water loading. Donc, le water loading qui, au lieu de se déshydrater, ça implique de boire des très, très grandes quantités d'eau. On parle de 6 à 10 litres. Il y en a même qui vont jusqu'à 20 litres. Mais il ne faut pas faire ça, là. Il ne faut pas essayer. Déjà, juste de faire boire les athlètes 1 litre par jour, ça peut être extrêmement difficile. Fait qu'imagine monter ça jusqu'à 10 litres. Le concept derrière, c'est que quand tu t'hyperhydrates, c'est que tu te mets à uriner aussi beaucoup. Et alors, comme tu urines, tu flushes, tu viens agir sur tes hormones, en fait, l'hormone antidiurétique qui permet de retenir les liquides. Donc, cette hormone-là serait complètement inhibée. Et ainsi, tu urines, et quand vient le temps de t'approcher de ta pesée, tu coupes les liquides. Donc, tu vas boire peut-être 500 millilitres ou jusqu'à 1,5 litre. Et comme tu as tellement bu dans les journées avant, bien, tu continues d'uriner et ainsi, tu vas peut-être perdre un peu plus de poids. Donc, ça, c'est la théorie derrière. Donc, je trouvais ça quand même très intriguant, excitant même. Donc, plutôt que de te déshydrater, tu t'hydrates, ce qui est parfait, ce qui est même beaucoup mieux. Et c'est aussi d'amener des manipulations au niveau de l'alimentation. Donc, dans les quelques jours avant la pesée, on va enlever toutes les fibres alimentaires le plus possible. Donc, en retirer les légumes, les grains entiers. Donc, là, les athlètes sont contents. On peut manger des bonbons, du chocolat, des jellos. Donc, eux autres, ils ne croient pas à ça. Ils sont comme, mais voyons qu'on va perdre du poids à manger des bonbons. Mais je dis, mais oui, la physiologie derrière la perte de poids, c'est qu'on coupe les liquides, on coupe l'intérieur de ton corps, on vide tes intestins le plus possible pour te préparer à la pesée, pour pas que tu aies à souffrir trop. Donc, c'est ça ce à quoi je me suis intéressée, d'essayer de mettre en place un bon protocole, bon, oui, d'hyperhydratation, de s'assurer que les athlètes s'hydratent plus que la normale et qu'on réduise le poids des athlètes proches d'une pesée, puis de le faire aussi selon de l'appliquer vraiment sur le terrain, de voir comme est-ce que c'est réaliste de faire ça pour un athlète, est-ce qu'ils ne vont pas arrêter d'uriner, ils vont se réveiller la nuit pour faire pipi, est-ce qu'ils vont être capables de s'imposer ça? Puis je dirais que ça a été quand même un succès. Les athlètes ont vraiment trippé. Il y avait comme une grosse phase d'éducation aussi sur la perte de poids. J'ai des athlètes qui m'en parlent encore, qui me demandent quand est-ce qu'on va recommencer, puis c'est quand le prochain. Donc,
je sais. Puis, c'est combien de litres? Là? Tu t'as dit c'est 6 à 10 litres par jour?
Oui. Donc, nous, ce qu'on avait fait dans le projet, c'est 80 millilitres par kilo de poids, ce qui donne à peu près là, entre 5 litres et demi jusqu'à 8 litres pour les plus grosses catégories.
Wow.
Mais il a fallu que j'y pratique les athlètes. Mais il y en a, juste boire 1 litre dans la journée, c'était difficile. Et je dis, OK, il faut qu'on aille jusqu'à 5, là, 6 pour certains. C'était
1 litre,
pas.
c'est trop difficile, hein? Pour
Oui,
certains.
parce que pour certains, boire de l'eau, ça les fait prendre du poids. Donc, ils n'ont pas nécessairement cette compréhension que ben, je vais boire de l'eau, mais je vais aussi l'uriner. Donc, ça va se stabiliser. Parce que c'est sûr, boire 1 litre d'eau, c'est 1 kilo. Donc, c'est sûr, si tu bois 1 litre d'eau, tu t'emballes sur la balance. Oh mon Dieu, j'ai pris du poids, mais tu vas l'uriner.
Right.
Donc, il y avait toute cette phase d'éducation-là à faire avant de vraiment les faire boire 3 litres, 5 litres. Puis pour les plus grosses catégories, ça allait beaucoup plus haut.
Est-ce qu'ils peuvent aussi boire du café ou du thé? C'est
Oui,
juste de
tout
l'eau.
à fait.
OK, ils peuvent
C'est
mélanger.
tous les liquides là, rentrent là-dedans, mais
OK.
le concept, c'est vraiment de les forcer à boire. Donc, si tu es bien hydraté, en principe, tu peux mieux t'entraîner, tu peux mettre plus d'intensité, probablement peut-être même transpirer plus et ainsi améliorer ta courbe de poids au final.
Interesting. Puis, si tu peux répondre à cette question en anglais, s'il vous plaît, maintenant, veux-tu que je pose la question encore ou?
Yeah.
Yeah.
En anglais, OK.
Oui, en anglais.
So my PhD research around optimization of acute weight loss in combat sports, but mainly I work with the judo team. So this project appeared again with Nicolas Gill when we sit together. We looked at the change in weight in the weigh-in that was done in 2014 by the IGF, where before the weigh-in would be in the morning, 2 to 3 hours before the first fight, where now it was changed to the day before. So it seemed like over the years, we saw that more athletes were cutting weight. So using that opportunity to, oh, well, we have more time to recover, so let's just maybe cut a bit more weight. And during that time, again, Nicolas said, well, why don't you just go investigate what's happening in the MMA? And that coach who called me at the exact right opportunity was just perfect. So I went there. They were using a lot of water loading technique, which is basically you need to drink 7 to 10 liters. Some go all the way to 20 liters per day. So it's like a 3-day before you cut almost all your fluid intake, and then after you have your weigh-in day. So, I mean, there was a lot of education to do with these guys before actually getting to the water intake. But it made me question a bit this new technique, because it's very popular on social media. If you go on YouTube videos and you see all these powerlifters who are showing what they're drinking, it's actually a technique that came from bodybuilding, where they would chug a lot of water before going on stage, so they would look leaner and they would be flushing a lot of fluid. So it's actually where this whole technique came from. It's been used from the 1970s, actually, in the bodybuilding environment. So that transition now to combat sports. And so the concept behind it is if you're drinking a lot of water, then you might inhibit those hormones that retain your body fluids. So your vasopressin, for instance, would be suppressed. And so you're flushing a lot of fluids. And then when comes the time that you're cutting your fluid intake, then you're still flushing some fluids. And perhaps it can help you to lose a little bit more weight. So this is what I was interested in back in the days. And it also, some athletes were coming to me and asking me questions around this technique. So everything fitted perfectly. We did a really great project. Athletes were doing the water loading and a controlled experimentation. So they would do both condition. The food was provided for the athletes. So of course, it's not very hard to recruit athletes when you say you got 2 weeks of free food.
I think you can win anyone with that.
Oh, for sure. It's not hard. It was really not hard. And it's not just about testing a technique. There was a whole concept of educating the athlete around proper weight cutting and what it could do to them. And some were just quite amazed to see like how much food we can eat and how much weight we lost. Like we lost between 2 and 3% of body weight. Wow. By eating a lot and then cutting the fluids at the last minute and then making weight the next day. So it was a great project. So I think mission accomplished for that project. Athletes are hoping for another one soon. So.
Right on. I think you should do a documentary on that. I don't know if there's any footage of that, just capturing that in your research, but it sounds like there's a lot of stories there. The next question I'd like to ask is, you've worked with all sorts of athletes from team and individual sports competitors at the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. With all the world traveling and experiences, which sport would you say is the most uniquely challenging when it comes to providing sports nutrition advice? I realize this is probably a tough question since it's an opportune one because you've worked with so many different Olympic sports teams and individuals. So I thought I'd ask you this one.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say combat sports again, our weight class athlete, just because for the same reason about this athlete we were discussing a bit earlier about cutting a certain amount of weight in a short amount of time with no history, no information about this athlete, not really knowing like what has this athlete done in the past, what has worked well. I think it's been like every games, there's an athlete coming to me and asking like, okay, I need to cut weight. It's not going really well. What should I do? And sometimes you're always a bit surprised, like, oh, you're this is the games and you should be a bit more prepared. But hey, I'm happy to help you. We'll do everything we can, because you want to be involved in the athlete, but you also don't want to hurt their performance. And you have a very, very limited amount of time. And you also have this sport who's waiting for their sandwich because there's no food at the venue. And then you have another request from another sport where there's 3 vegetarian athletes and there's no food for them at the venue. So you have to like juggle with a bunch of requests. And sometimes they're all coming at the same time. And you're like, okay, you have 3 kilos to lose. I need to do this and this first, and then I'm with you. So it's like spreading the amount of work. What is the priority and who needs to come in first? But I'd say definitely weight class athlete and athletes who have severe allergies, for the Beijing game, for instance, peanut allergy, celiac athletes. Vegetarian will be quite fine. Like once we're in the village, usually we eat really well. There's no issues at all, but it's once we go out venues or outside accommodations that we don't have the same type of food. So this is where sometimes it's a bit more challenging, and this can be in any sports. Yeah.
If I could throw, it's really interesting what you're saying here, and I just wanted to know along those lines, because you've been exposed to so many different sports, and you've attended Summer Olympic Games and Winter Games. Have you ever interacted with other sports nutritionists from other countries? And if so, what were some of the most interesting to you and unique sort of practices or methodologies that they employed in their trade that you found kind of like either, oh, that's really interesting, or, oh, wow, that's crazy? Like, are there any stories along those lines?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Would you mind sharing a few? I'm curious.
I can share a few, of course. So usually what brings dietitians across countries at the Olympics is because we have issues in the dining hall. So we all know each other because we're a very, very limited group of dietitians internationally, and we over the years connected, and we always connect on site. But I will just take an example. In the Rio Games were quite intense in terms of food delivery, food production, food quantity. And we had a big meeting in the dining hall, and we could all exchange, our phone numbers or WhatsApp and all of that. But you could still sense competition. Like you could still sense like, oh, if I get that information, I'm not going to give it to you, sort of, where I just like, well, if I get the menu, you work with these athletes, I will gladly share it with you. I will gladly share you my contact where I can order the drinks, fill up the fridges, like no problem. But for sure, you can feel this little, I'm not going to give this to the Canadian dietitians. Trying to work the best we can together. And I know that some countries after the Rio Games, have now a policy where they feed athletes somewhere else. They bring their chef, they bring, like they make this cafeteria in their own hotel, where Canadian approach is, it's more to work with the organizing committee, the food service, understand like if we have problems, what's the problem, what can we do to fix it. For in Rio, for instance, there was no labels. Like in the dining hall, you're supposed to have every single is labeled, exactly the name of the recipe, all the allergens, the ingredients. Like it's you go to a station, like, oh, okay, this is this. But then when you're looking at the recipe and you're like, that's definitely not beef, but it says that it's beef. So it was really to help the food service in terms of, this is a mistake, this needs to be reorganized, where other countries are maybe removing completely the athletes from the dining hall and making sure that they eat somewhere else. So that's a strategy. I was like, wow, you need to have a lot of money to be able to do that. It needs a lot of organization and preparation. During the pandemic, I'm pretty sure it is possible. We have so much restrictions with these games in Beijing that I doubt that sports would be able to do that. But I'm curious, like when I'm on site, I'm very curious to see what they're doing.
It's interesting because again, we don't hear about that aspect of the games, which is the athletes and what they eat. And what you described there is really interesting. All the sports nutritionists in this meeting, the information being shared, and people even in that setting are still thinking strategically as how they could,
of course, but it's normal,
right? Like, it's competition, right? It's part of it, no doubt. I guess I have one last question, but if we could go back just in terms of the global state of sports nutrition, which country or which countries are known to kind of produce, which countries do a lot of research on sports nutrition, and which ones tend to produce the highest number of sports nutritionists and are known for that? Which country would that be, or countries?
So definitely Australia and the UK. There's a great number of researchers there. It's actually the best reference in terms of, when we see a published paper from Louise Berg, John Hawley, James Morton, Graham Close. So these are two big research groups. So we tend to look a bit more for these countries in terms of more, I would say, applied research projects. They do usually, like they are the ones we would go for. Like, let's say we have an idea, I want to do an altitude project with a specific sport. I would go to specific researchers. Like we're a small group, so we do know each other quite well. But yeah, definitely these countries are probably the best source, the best reference in terms of sport nutrition. We also have really, really great researchers in Canada. We all collaborate also with these researchers out in the UK and Australia.
Right on. So there is a lot of collaboration and networking and
yeah, absolutely. Again, we're a very tight and small group of researcher and sports scientists around athletes. So we always end up working all together and collaborating together, for sure.
Well, that's good to know. I have one last question, which actually fits into that, Catherine. Thank you very much for your time. I know we've gone over.
No problem.
I know we've gone over time a little bit, but it's been really interesting. This last one is, in your opinion, with all the advancements in sports science and health research, what would you say is the future of sports nutrition? Where do you see the innovation in the field coming from? And what will sports nutrition look like 20 years from now, in your opinion?
Um, so it's not the first time I'm being asked that question, and I always answer, I think that we need to be able to take what's available in the research and apply it very well. Because there are some very, very good research out there. We know we should be doing this. Let's just take the collagen research, for instance. Collagen has been proving to increase probably an injury post ACL or MCL injury or a tear. We should be probably looking more into this, but finding a good product tested. So we're sure that there's no like doping substances or that dissolves well in the water, because it makes like disgusting and it tastes absolutely gross. Like, okay, we know we have to do this in this study, but applying this perfectly is a high challenge. Same, I would say the example around beta alanine. Beta alanine is a great supplement to increase intensity or for high intensity efforts that has a high lactate production, such as judo. They should all be taking beta alanine. Beta alanine is extremely hard to find. Just to find a good product tested that's available for us to have and that's not too costly, extremely hard. So I would want athletes to be on collagen, probably taking beta alanine, but it's extremely hard. Or just making sure that we should be eating 1 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight after each training sessions. And I still see athletes drinking water after exercise. And they're like, well, that's all I have. I'm going to go eat home. I'm like, yeah, but you should be doing it now. You should not be waiting. Yeah, but I'll be home in like 20 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, probably it could work. So I think that the focus should be around really like applying the research on the field, which is very, very challenging, should be the focus for probably the next 10 years and not necessarily trying to create anything new. And I think there's more and more research around like genes, like personalized and individualizing the diet.
Right.
So instead of like spreading the same information to everybody, I think this technology is going to become much more interesting in like 20 years. Like it is available now. I don't think we're there yet. But I do think that like when we're able to really like personalize the diet of an athlete based on specific genes that they have, I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting studies.
Big time. I can only imagine it's going to be fascinating for the world of sports, combat sports, judo, and so on. Just seeing the athlete of the future, and obviously sports nutritionists like yourself are heavily are involved in that process. Catherine, I want to thank you very much for this interview and your time. And I believe you're off to Beijing for the Winter Games, right?
Yes, I am indeed.
Are you excited?
Excited. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's I think these games are going to set the bar very, very high for the next ones. We've been seeing some technology with robots that will be bringing us food. So in the main
that's awesome.
I'll send you the link.
Please.
You the link.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I watched that video and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot wait to try this. So yeah, probably like technology developed to minimize contacts.
Right.
So you would sit in your little cubicle, you can make your order, and then the robot just brings you the food from the top.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Where can we follow you? Are you on some of these social media platforms? Are you one of those influencers? No, just kidding. Are you on?
Wish.
You should be. You're a subject matter expert when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah, I need to hire someone to do all my social media because it's time consuming. I'm very motivated for 2 weeks and then it's too long. I should. I am available through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not very active, especially since the PhD is keeping me quite busy,
Oh,
but
right.
I do
Yeah.
have a lot of ideas when that page will be turned to put on social media and to engage more people on the page. Yeah, I think this is the best way to get in touch with me, or through my website as well. So nutritionperformance.ca, where I post quite a lot of recipes, easy one, dish lists, so people can have a look. And yeah.
And it's cool. You even have it available, I think, in like 4 languages, right? Like
Yeah.
which is awesome. It's like you
Google
got it.
Translate
Hey,
does it
why
all
not?
for me.
Why not? So I mean, you have a global audience of people who are tuning in and hearing you. Thank you very much for your time once again, and I do look forward to speaking with you in regards to that research you're doing. So thank you very much. Have a good
You're
evening.
very welcome. We'll talk soon.
Definitely. Take care.